When we first met, I thought I'd found the woman I wanted to spend the rest of my life with. She was simple yet attractive, a good listener, a hearty laugh, and never seemed fake. We started dating fairly quickly, moved in together 6 months later, and got married a year later. It seemed like everything was like most people: work, home, friends, the occasional trip to the seaside. She said she wanted children, but needed to live for herself first, and I agreed because I wasn't in a rush either. The first few years of our life together were calm. We had occasional arguments over little things, but nothing serious. I trusted her completely. It never even crossed my mind that there might be a secret. Then one day, I accidentally saw a strange message on her phone. I wasn't one to check my messages, but then my phone rang, and a messenger app with some strange username appeared on the screen. There was a short message: "Tomorrow at 7:00 p.m. as agreed." At first, I didn't even pay attention, thinking maybe it was a friend or colleague. But that evening she said she was going to a friend's bachelorette party. I believed her, although something inside me pricked. The next day she returned late, tired but cheerful, and I tried not to ask unnecessary questions. A couple of weeks later, the situation repeated itself. Another message, another strange contact. This time I couldn't stand it anymore, and while she was sleeping, opened the conversation. There were no direct statements, only hints and agreed-upon times and places. Anxiety arose inside me, but there was no concrete proof that this was cheating. I decided to say nothing for now. Everything began to become clearer later, when an acquaintance of mine accidentally sent me a link to some website. He worked in it and often received spam in his inbox, sometimes with rather explicit content. He sent me a link in a chat as a joke, like, "See what wonders there are." At first, I wanted to ignore it, but curiosity got the better of me. When I opened the site and played one of the videos, I literally froze. There she was on the screen in front of me, my wife, without a doubt, without any ambiguity. I couldn't believe my eyes. I sat there for a few minutes, staring blankly at the screen while one thought kept running through my head: this is a mistake, it can't be. But the longer I watched, the more I realized it was real. I started searching for more videos, and it turned out there were many of them with her. Different dates, different locations, different partners. Apparently she had been filming this for years. I went into shock. I didn't know what to think or how to react. Everything I thought was a normal family life turned out to be a cover. She had been living a double life, and I hadn't noticed a thing this whole time. Fury rose up inside me, but at the same time, I felt a kind of numbness. I wanted to rush to her and tell her everything, but I held back. I needed to sort this out first. I spent a few days poring over everything I could find. Her stage name, the one she went by, was mentioned on forums, and it turned out she even had a bit of a following in that community. She was known, discussed, praised by some, criticized by others. I read this and couldn't believe they were talking about a woman who came home every night and calmly cooked dinner. The more I dug, the worse I felt. I noticed that her first videos appeared before our wedding, and then they were released regularly. This meant that all these years, while I was building a family, she had secretly continued to work in this industry. I began to replay our entire past together in my head. Her frequent excuses about being late at work, sudden meetings with friends, unexpected trips for a couple of days, it all fit together. I felt like a complete idiot because I believed her every word, didn't ask questions, didn't doubt her. At first, two emotions warred within me: betrayal and shame. I thought that if any of my friends or family found out, I simply wouldn't be able to show my face. And then came a feeling of helplessness. How could I have been married for 5 years and not notice the obvious? I realized I couldn't keep silent any longer. I had to figure out how to confront her with the facts. But I also understood that any mistake on my part could ruin everything completely. There was only one thought in my head: why did she hide it, and why didn't she stop after the wedding? That night, I couldn't sleep. I looked at her while she slept next to me, and I couldn't understand how she could lie there like that, as if nothing had happened. My heart was clenched with anger, but I still didn't know what to do next. I decided I couldn't drag it out any longer, and in the morning, as she was getting ready for work, I stopped her. My voice was shaking, but I forced myself to speak calmly, because I knew that if I started yelling right away, she'd just close up and start denying it. I told her I knew about her second life, that I'd seen the video, and that there was no point in pretending anymore. She froze at first, then suddenly burst into laughter, as if it were a joke or a prank. But when she realized I was serious, her face changed. She turned pale, her gaze became heavy, and silence fell over the room. The first thing she said was, "You weren't supposed to see that." This phrase stunned me even more. I expected tears, excuses, denials, but not such a calm and cold answer. I asked how many years this had been going on. She was silent for a moment, then said about 5. I remembered the dates of the first videos I found and realized that she was not lying. I asked why she didn't stop after the wedding. She answered that it was work, and she couldn't just quit because too much was tied to it. I didn't understand what tied meant. She explained that she initially went there for the money. When we first started dating, she had debts and needed to pay them off urgently. At the time, she thought it was temporary, but then everything sucked her in. At first it was once a month, then more often, then there were permanent contracts. She admitted that after the wedding she tried to quit, but she couldn't because she knew that without her participation, people would lose money and she would lose everything she had earned. I listened and couldn't believe my ears. I said that money couldn't justify such a lie and such a betrayal. She started making excuses, saying that she loved me, that our life was real for her, and everything else was just work, where she played a role. These words sounded disgusting and cynical. I asked how one could talk about love and at the same time sleep with other men in front of the camera. She looked at me and repeated that it didn't matter to her, that she had long since stopped feeling anything during filming, and she left all her emotions for me. I tried to understand her logic, but everything inside was boiling. I wanted to scream, but I held back. I asked how much longer she was going to do this. She said that she thought about ending it, but she was afraid of my reaction and that the truth would still come out someday. I told her that she had destroyed our trust and our future, and that now I didn't know who she really was. She started crying for the first time in all this time. She said that she loved me and didn't want to lose me. I looked at her and understood that I couldn't just forgive her. Every scene, every video I had seen was etched in my memory, and it was impossible to erase it. I asked her a direct question. If I hadn't found out, would she have continued? She lowered her eyes and nodded silently. This answer was the final point for me. I realized that everything I believed in was a lie. Even her tears seemed like a game. I didn't know what to do next, get a divorce or try to save the family. Two feelings were fighting in my head, the love that was still glimmering and the hatred for what she had done. She tried to come up to me, to hug me, but I pushed her away. I said that I needed time to think everything over and left the house. For several hours, I simply wandered around the city, not noticing anything around me. I thought about our years together, how we made plans, how we dreamed of children. It all seemed like a farce now. The words she said, "It's just a job," kept spinning in my head. I couldn't accept that someone could do that. When I got home, I found her sitting on the couch with red eyes. She asked what I had decided. I said that it was nothing for now, but we could no longer live like before. She nodded, realizing that there was no turning back. Then I decided to set a condition. If she really wanted to save the family, she had to immediately stop filming and sever all ties with this industry. She agreed immediately, without even hesitation. She said that she was ready to give up everything for me, but I understood that words are worth nothing. Actions were needed. I said that I would check her phone, email, all contacts, and if I noticed anything suspicious, then everything would end once and for all. She agreed and said that she was ready for anything, just so that I would not leave. But even after that, there was emptiness inside me. I knew that trust was broken and it would be almost impossible to restore it. I went to sleep in another room because I couldn't stand being near her. All night long, I kept thinking about the same thing. Why did she do all this, and would I ever be able to look at her as a wife again, and not as an actress from the movies I'd seen? The first few days after the conversation were the hardest. I tried to act calm, but her every move made me suspicious. When she picked up her phone, I immediately assumed she was texting someone from that circle. If she was even half an hour late, I'd start to panic, thinking she'd lied again and was secretly filming videos. She noticed my state, and every evening we'd end up arguing. She insisted she'd given up, that she'd deleted all her contacts and never returned to the studios, but I couldn't take her word for it. I checked her phone, her email, her browser history. At some point, I realized I'd become an investigator, not a husband. And even when I didn't find anything suspicious, it didn't make me feel any better, because somewhere deep down, I still thought she was smarter and just knew how to cover her tracks. She started suggesting we go to a psychologist together, but I refused, because I thought no psychologist could erase the image from my head that I'd already seen. I couldn't forget those videos. Sometimes at night, I'd turn on one of them to make sure it was really her, and every time I was convinced. It was torture, but it was as if I was torturing myself to finally understand that I wasn't going crazy. Over time, it began to seem to me that she was behaving too correctly. Too calm, too affectionate, too attentive, as if she were trying to assuage her guilt. But this irritated me even more. I felt that these efforts were not sincere, but were made only to keep me from leaving. One day, I couldn't bear it and told her that I couldn't live with the constant feeling of being deceived. She burst into tears and asked what she could do to make me believe her. I didn't answer because I didn't know myself. Nothing she did could restore my trust. Inside me, the thought lingered that for 5 years she had peacefully lived in two worlds, smiling at me and making plans, while secretly working in this filth. If she could hide it for so many years, she could continue to do so. At some point, I started going through her things, checking her bags, her wallet, even her underwear. I was looking for some kind of confirmation that she hadn't given up on me completely. Sometimes I'd find receipts from stores she supposedly hadn't gone to, and this would spark new arguments. She'd scream that I was going crazy, that she was innocent and doing everything she could to prove her loyalty. But all I saw were lies. Anger was building inside me, and I knew that if this continued, we'd both break. One evening, she confessed that her ex-producer was still writing and trying to persuade her to come back. She said she'd turned him down, but she was afraid he'd start blackmailing her or spreading new material. It was a shock to me. I realized that this life would never let us go. Even if she quit filming, the past would always be there. Those videos wouldn't disappear, and the people who watched them wouldn't either. And the scariest thing is that I'm now part of this secret myself, because I live next to her. I started seriously considering divorce. The thought of the future was terrifying. What if we have children, and one day one of my classmates finds these videos and shows them? What if my parents or colleagues find out? I understood that this could destroy not only my family, but my whole life. I tried to imagine that I could simply forget and move on, but the more I thought about it, the more I realized that forgetting was impossible. Every time I looked at her, I saw not my wife, but that woman on the screen. And the more I tried to push these thoughts away, the more they returned. The moment came when I realized, either I leave or I completely lose myself. I started packing, but she noticed and caused a scene. She screamed that she loved me, that she was ready to do anything just to save the family. She begged me for another chance. I stood there with a suitcase in my hands, feeling everything inside me tearing apart. I truly did love her once, and perhaps some of that love still remains, but the rest turned into disgust and pain. I told her I couldn't live with a woman who had lied to my face for 5 years. She fell to her knees, grabbed my hands, and begged me to stay. I pushed her away and left, though my heart was heavy. I rented a room from a friend and lived there for a few days. I thought that would be the end of it, but after a couple of days, she started calling and texting me nonstop. She said she was ready to publicly admit that she had left her previous life and wanted to make things right. I didn't answer, but inside I felt broken. On the one hand, I knew I had done the right thing, but on the other, I tormented myself every day with the question, what if I had cut her off too abruptly, or what if there was a way to forgive? But then I'd watch one of her videos again and realize that it wasn't. It is impossible to forgive her. Even if she changes, I will never be the same again. Several weeks passed after I left, and I began to get used to the new reality. I rented a small apartment, made everything minimally comfortable, and tried to distract myself with work. But she did not leave me alone. Every day there were messages, calls, photos, where she wrote that she misses me, that she is ready to undergo any tests if only I would come back. At first I did not answer, then at some point I lost my temper and wrote to her to leave me alone. But instead of leaving me alone, she became even more active. She came to my house, waited near my work, met me in the store. She behaved like a person who is desperately afraid of losing control. I saw her eyes full of tears, but this no longer caused pity, only fatigue and irritation. She tried to involve my friends, called my parents, explained that she made a mistake, but now she realized it. I felt ashamed that she was dragging everyone around her into this. My parents called and asked if what they had heard was true. I didn't go into detail, but I said we were having problems and I didn't want to discuss it. I was afraid the truth would come out and there would be shame. This only strengthened my resolve to keep my distance. But she went even further. One evening I came home and found her at my door. She had somehow found out the address. She was sitting on the floor with her bag and said she wouldn't leave until I let her in. I knew the neighbors might call the police, so I opened the door to avoid a scene. She came in, hugged me, I pushed her away, said I didn't want to hear anything. But she started talking nonstop. She promised to take a lie detector test, to see a psychologist, a priest, anywhere, just so I would believe her. Tears flowed like a river. She fell to her knees, begging me to give her a chance. Anger and pity fought inside me. I wanted to kick her out, but I couldn't. I just sat and listened. She told me that she had already terminated all the contracts, that she had deleted her accounts, that she no longer communicated with those people. She said that she was even ready to move to another city with me, change her name, start all over again. It sounded desperate, but there was truth in her voice. However, I understood that the problem was not only in her actions, but in the fact that everything inside me was already broken. Even if she really abandoned the past, it would still remain in my memory, and I would never be able to erase it. I told her this directly. She burst into tears and began to thrash about, screaming that she could not live without me. For the first time, I was afraid that she could do something to herself. So for some time, I decided to keep her under control, although I understood that it was a trap. We lived in my apartment for several days. I tried to make sure that she was not lying. She really did sit at home, hardly used her phone, cooked, tried to show that she was an ordinary wife. But every time I looked at her, the scenes I had seen flashed before my eyes. It drove me crazy. I started to lose my temper over little things. Any look from her, any word irritated me. She endured, kept silent, pretended that everything was fine. But one day I noticed how she was sitting on her phone and quickly minimized the screen when I came in. It was like an electric shock. I snatched the phone from her, started checking it, and saw correspondence. Not with the producer, not with colleagues, but with some girl. There were words of support, a discussion of her condition, advice on how to cope with depression. It turned out that she had turned to a psychologist online so as not to lose control. I didn't know how to react to this. On the one hand, it proved that she was really trying to change. On the other hand, I felt trapped. She did everything to get me back, but I still couldn't accept her. I began to understand that the longer I dragged it out, the more I tortured both myself and her. One evening, I told her that this was the end, that I would not be able to forgive and would never forget. She sat silently, and then quietly said that then she had no reason to live. These words sounded scary. I felt responsible. I didn't love her as much as I used to, but I didn't want her to do anything to herself because of me. I told her I'd help her through this, but I couldn't be there for her as a husband anymore. She looked at me blankly, then went into the bathroom and didn't come out for a long time. I knocked on the door, thinking something had happened, but eventually she came out, clean and calm, saying she understood. But I didn't believe it was that simple. The next day I went to work, and when I returned, she wasn't home. There was a note on the table where she wrote that she was leaving so as not to disturb me. I felt relieved and worried at the same time. I didn't know where she had gone, what would happen to her next, or whether the worst would happen again. But I knew one thing. Even if she disappeared forever, I would still be left with this burden in my head and would never be the same person. After she left the note and disappeared, I felt like I could breathe freely for the first time in a long time. But along with it came a new feeling, anxiety and emptiness. I didn't know where she was, what was happening to her, and I couldn't get her words about how she had no reason to live without me out of my head. I tried calling her several times, but my phone was turned off. I was nervous for the first 2 days, then decided that if she was gone, that was the way it should be, and that it would only make it easier for me to move on. But a week later, she contacted me herself. She wrote briefly, "I'm fine, I need time, don't look for me." These words calmed me somewhat, but even more questions came to mind. Where is she? With whom? What is she doing? Has she returned to the life she promised to leave? I tried to push these thoughts away, but they kept coming back. At work, I looked tired. My colleagues asked if everything was okay, and I laughed it off. Inside, however, the thought nagged at me. Maybe I made a mistake when I kicked her out completely. And at the same time, I knew there was no turning back. The past was too difficult, and even if she really had quit filming, it wouldn't change anything. Another 2 weeks passed when she unexpectedly showed up on my doorstep. This time she looked different, thinner, tired, with dark circles under her eyes. She was holding a small bag and her eyes were tired. She said she'd been staying with a friend, trying to figure herself out, and was now ready to show that she'd changed. I looked at her and didn't know what to do. Resentment was still seething inside, but I wasn't indifferent either. I let her in, though I'd warned her right away that it meant nothing. She nodded and said she just wanted to be close. For the first few days, she was quiet, almost unnoticeable. She cooked, cleaned, and tried not to irritate me. I saw that she had changed externally. She began wearing less makeup, dressed more simply, as if trying to erase the image I remembered from her videos. But for me, it didn't matter much. I still kept seeing her past, even when she was just sitting across from me at dinner. Sometimes I caught myself studying her face, searching for similarities with the expressions I'd seen on the screen. And it made my insides twist. She knew I didn't believe her, so she suggested a concrete step. She said she was willing to show me all the messages, all the contacts, so I could make sure there was nothing hidden anymore. I agreed. We sat together, and she opened chats one by one, showing empty dialogues or deleted contacts. Everything looked clean. But I couldn't shake the thought that the real connections might be somewhere else, on another device, under another account. I asked her point blank if she was hiding a second phone or something similar. She answered sharply that she wasn't, that I was again looking for something that didn't exist. We started arguing, and once again I realized that there was no trust left. She cried, saying she was tired of proving herself, but all I heard was my own thoughts. If someone hid a double life for 5 years, what's stopping them from doing it further? The next day, I caught myself watching her like a stranger. When she went to the store, I checked the receipt and the time on my bank app to make sure she was really there and not somewhere else. She came back and caught me doing it. Another fight, more tears, more of her telling me I was going crazy. But I couldn't do otherwise. I felt like I had to control her every move. She started suggesting drastic measures. She said she was ready to move with me to another city, that she was ready to change her job, documents, name, if only I would stop doubting her. I saw her desperation and understood that she was truly ready for anything. But this scared me even more, because if a person so desperately wants to erase the past, then it really is so terrible that they themselves cannot live with it. And that means I will never be able to either. Soon, I noticed she'd started keeping a diary. She didn't try to hide it, leaving it on the table. One day, I opened it and read a few pages. She wrote about how she hated her past, how she regretted ever getting into this industry, how she feared I'd never forgive her. Reading it, I felt a strange sense of relief and pain at the same time. On the one hand, I saw that she realized everything, but on the other, I knew it was too late. The past cannot be erased with words. A month after her return, I realized I was at a dead end. She was trying her best, but nothing was changing inside me. I couldn't look at her as my wife again. Even physical intimacy had become impossible. I pushed her away when she tried to get closer, and I could see how it was killing her inside. She started talking about children again, about how if we had a child, everything would change, that I would be able to switch gears and forget. But to me, this sounded like another attempt to disguise the problem. I understood that children wouldn't save us in this situation. They would only make things worse. A solution was brewing inside, but I hadn't voiced it yet. I saw that she wasn't giving up, but I already felt like I was playing a role in someone else's play. We sat at the same table, ate the same food, but we lived in different worlds. And every day I realized more and more that this lull was temporary and that a new explosion lay ahead. Several months passed after she returned and we began living together again, but now by new rules, no pressure, no attempts to control each other, although internally I still felt wary. The first few weeks, we simply tried to exist close without invading our personal space. She cooked, cleaned, and did small chores, and I tried to cope with thoughts of the past and my habit of constantly checking in on her. Gradually, I noticed that she had truly changed, that she was trying not to repeat the mistakes that had previously destroyed trust. She spent less time on the phone, didn't make excuses, and didn't talk too much about the past. She learned to calmly accept my doubts and questions and answer honestly, without excuses, without aggression or tears, which was very different from her previous behavior. I, too, gradually began to let go of the resentment. Not right away, not completely, but I understood that constant bickering and suspicion wouldn't restore trust, our past lives, or what had been lost. We began to build a new dynamic, each doing our own thing, but still trying to find moments together. We started going for walks together, sometimes going to the movies or dinner, trying to reestablish the habit of being together without pressure. Sometimes I caught myself thinking that for the first time in months, I wasn't replaying scenes from the past, but simply observing what was happening now. She also noticed the changes, and said she was happy that I was giving her a chance to show her that I could trust her. This didn't mean everything was perfect. There was still some tension, but now it was manageable. She began to talk about how she had changed, about her new goals, about how she was trying to develop, learn new things, play sports, read books, and find a hobby unrelated to her past life. I saw that she was genuinely trying, and not doing it for me or our coexistence, but to make herself feel better. This gave me a certain relief and an inner peace that had previously seemed unattainable. Gradually, I began to notice that even small moments together were starting to bring joy. We cooked dinner together, discussed the news, sometimes simply sat in silence, but this silence was no longer tense, it became comfortable. I began to understand that trust is not rebuilt in a single action, but through a series of small deeds and time. I saw that she truly appreciated this and tried to behave in a way that allowed me to see her without fear, without constant wariness. Sometimes I caught myself smiling when she did something familiar, simple, and human, putting on the kettle, pouring water, clearing the dishes. Before, such things were just background noise, but now they became a sign that she had truly changed. We began discussing plans for the future, but now without illusions, without the expectation that everything would be as before. We talked about work, trips, friends, but never about her past life. I realized that some things can't be changed, but you can learn to live with them and build something new. She also began to take a more active interest in my life, supporting my projects, and showing genuine concern without pressure or manipulation. It was unusual, but pleasant. Sometimes I caught myself thinking about the past no longer with hatred or anger, but simply with understanding. It's part of our history, it shaped us, but it doesn't determine what will happen next. We began to seek shared goals, small trips, home improvement plans, renovations, and household projects we could tackle together. This helped us gradually rebuild the habit of being partners, rather than suspicious of each other. A few more months passed, and I felt I could look at her calmly without intrusive memories. She, too, felt more confident that we could build a life without constant pressure and fear. I realized that trust can be restored, but not immediately and not completely. It takes time and effort from both parties. We began to perceive the past as a fact that cannot be changed, but which can be left behind and build a new life, based on present actions, not on old mistakes. Every day we watched each other, but now it was not suspicion, but simply attention and care. I no longer checked my phone, did not spy on her every move, and she no longer constantly tried to prove something. We simply began living close to each other and gradually learned to trust again. Slowly but surely, the tension faded, giving way to a habit of being together without drama, without conflict, without pressure. And although thoughts of the past sometimes returned, they no longer destroyed me or made me doubt the reality of the present moment. We continued to build a new life, and with each passing day it became easier to realize that the past was behind us, and that the most important thing now was the present and what we were doing to maintain this peace and coexistence. Almost a year had passed since she returned, and we began living together again by new rules. This year was slow and difficult, but it became a time of real change for both of us. We no longer discussed the past, did not recall those years when trust was broken, because we understood that this would not change anything, but only destroy everything we were trying to build now. She truly changed. She stopped hiding, no longer wore masks, and did not try to please me through ostentatious actions. Every action she took was honest and open, and I saw it. I stopped checking her phone, messages, bills, browser history, because trust, although not yet complete, was restored naturally through her constant and consistent actions. We began to find joy in shared moments again, cooking dinner together, renovating, going for walks, and sometimes just sitting next to each other without saying anything, and this silence no longer felt tense, but comfortable. I saw that she appreciated simple things, learning to enjoy the everyday moments, and I was learning to let go of control because I understood that trust can't be regained by force. It must be allowed to emerge. We began making plans together, short trips, projects around the house, meeting with friends, discussing work and personal development. All of this helped us gradually rebuild the habit of being partners rather than suspecting each other. Sometimes I caught myself thinking that for the first time in a long time, I could look at her without memories of the past, without anger or pain. Her gaze now evoked calm, not anxiety, and her smile no longer reminded me of what I once saw on the screen. It had become part of my real life, not the past. A sense of relief was building inside me. I realized that while the past cannot be erased, it should not control the present. We both realized that the mistakes we'd made in the past were part of our history, but they didn't determine what would happen next. She continued to develop. She found new interests, started playing sports, reading books, and getting involved in creative pursuits, and I saw that this wasn't for me, but for her own sake. This helped me stop thinking that her life was made up of illusions and roles she played for others. We began to discuss feelings openly, but now it was without accusations, drama, or pressure. We learned to listen to each other and hear without judgment. Sometimes we simply sat in silence next to each other, and this silence became familiar and calm, without fear or suspicion. Gradually, a sense of true stability emerged. We lived close, knowing we could lean on each other, but without fear or control. I saw her learning to be part of ordinary life, and this gave me the feeling that anything was still possible. We no longer talked about children until we were completely sure that trust and calm had become the foundation of our lives. We understood that rushing could destroy what had been built so long. The past was left behind, and the present became precious because it required no justification or fear. Every day we learned to trust again, without coercing each other, without demanding proof, but simply by observing each other's actions. Small gestures, a cup of tea, cleaning, a walk together, became signs that trust was gradually returning. And although thoughts of the past still occasionally surfaced, they no longer tormented us but reminded us. We had been through hard times, but managed to stay together. Ultimately, I realized this wasn't a story about punishment or retribution, but a story about how people are capable of change, and that trust can be restored if both parties sincerely want it. We began to live not as husband and wife in the traditional sense, but as partners who are aware of their mistakes, understand the consequences, and build a future together without illusions or secrecy. And it was in this silence, in these ordinary days, devoid of drama and lies, that I first felt I could look at her calmly, see her as she is, not as she was. And this piece became a true ending to a story that began 5 years ago with lies, betrayal, and secrecy, but ended with the understanding that real life is created every day, through honest actions, openness, and a shared desire to be together, despite everything that has happened.